are elected mayor again, how are you going to work with the current council? There's been a lot of public scrutiny between you and the council, and so someone who's looking to come and be a part of that council, how are you looking to work better?
So to be very blunt, I want to work in good faith with anybody that is willing to work in good faith with me. There is a necessary tension that always exists between any executive branch and a legislative branch. That would be the case now, that will be the case in future years. However, I don't insist that people agree with me 100% of the time. Here's what I ask for. One, I ask that people love their city more than their ideology. Two, I ask that they listen to data and trust experts, recognizing that I'm not an expert on everything. In fact, I'm an expert on barely anything. But I listen to people that actually know what they're talking about, and I expect council members to do the same thing. And three, I do expect council members, in fact, I expect everybody to say the same thing to me in private that they will then say in public. And so what I don't want to hear anymore is, Mayor, I know you're doing the right thing on this, but I've got to oppose you because I've got to appease this particular interest group. Garbage. We should have the guts to tell our own side what they don't want to hear. And I know there are times when I've disagreed with people in this room. I'm sorry, but we do disagree at times. And that, I think, is the nature of any mayor that you will ever have in the history of this city. But you also have to be willing to tell the truth when the truth is tough. And I have seen more than a few instances where someone is concerned to tell the truth because their home is going to get spray painted, or they're going to get protested, or they're going to experience a whole bunch of wrath online. And from personal experience, I'll tell you, it doesn't tickle. It's not all that easy the first couple of times, but over time you gain thicker skin, and you learn. And what I'm looking for in a city council is not a council that's going to agree with me 100% of the time. I'm not. I'm looking for a council that will operate in good faith. And I will operate in good faith with them. And I want to add just a couple things here, because this is important. There's been plenty of publicity about the number of vetoes that I've had over this last year. I did not need to veto nearly as many things in my first 6 years in office. I believe, and I'll have to check to make sure, that I had to veto more things over this last year than all of the other years combined. I did this not because I like to veto stuff, I don't. I did this because the direction that was taken was wrong for the city. And I'll give you, so I will work with anybody in good faith, but what I'm not going to do is abdicate my responsibility to do what is right for Minneapolis. And I'll give you a few examples here. Back in 2020, there was a very large group of people that came to my home 5 days after George Floyd was murdered, and I went outside because I believed in the cause of shifting the culture of the MPD. They asked for me to commit to defunding and abolishing the police. And I said no. I got spat on and called names and shamed. And maybe at the time I felt like my political career might have been over. But I knew I had done the right thing. The next day, a veto-proof majority of the city council committed to the same thing that I had just said no to. But not just that. More recently, who remembers the Uber Lyft issue? Let's go through this. Let's talk about it. I supported a dramatic increase in the rate of pay for drivers. And I was willing to work with a council to implement a dramatic increase of pay. I talked to drivers, I talked to riders, I talked to Uber and Lyft, I talked to people with disabilities. We brought these groups together, And I put out a policy based on that and based on data that was provided by the Department of Labor at the state of Minnesota. And that data showed that there was a range of options that you could look at. And what the council did is they had one option that was way outside of what that data showed. They did not change the numbers that they provided, they stayed the same. That did not make sense to me. Because yes, Uber and Lyft was going to leave at that rate. And what happened? The state of Minnesota came in, they overruled the city council, they took away our authority to regulate in this area in its entirety, and then they implemented a rate that was nearly identical to the one that I had proposed 6 months earlier. So again, I'm going to tell the truth. Second issue I want to mention, George Floyd Square. And you know, there are arguments that I may disagree with, but at least I can understand the argument. There are other arguments where I can't even understand what the argument is exactly. And so, with George Floyd Square, the council asked us to go out to do quite a bit of engagement. We did. 17,000 hours worth of engagement, spending an inordinate amount of money to talk to countless people, door knock, host community sessions, do listening sessions, have community gatherings. And about 70% of the people said that they wanted to see an open and flexible street. One where, yes, you could close the street down at George Floyd Square for gatherings and festivals and healing sessions, but you could also open the street up to allow for the highest ridership of any bus line in the state of Minnesota to get through, to allow for small local businesses to have access, and yes, to be able to drive a car through the intersection. But here's the thing. Even if we were to disregard what the community engagement said, and by the way, it said about 70% of the people in those surrounding neighborhoods wanted that open and flexible option. But even if we were to disregard that, and this is the part that makes no sense to me, even if I was on board with their vision, the thing that they want to do, they can't do. Why? Because of the law. The law says that you can't have 50% or more of the property owners on that block where you're creating a pedestrian mall oppose that pedestrian mall. Right now, 100% of the property owners that we have talked to oppose the pedestrian mall. And so I'm going to tell you the truth. That neighborhood needs to move forward. People need to move forward. Everybody agrees with a long-term permanent memorial to the legacy of George Floyd. Everybody agrees that we should never have any car traffic roll over the place where George Floyd was murdered again. We're all on board on that. We agree. But that neighborhood needs to move forward. And right now, as it sits, nothing is going to happen because they can't do the thing that they want to do. Mark my words.
For good reason, Mr. Mayor. I love you to pieces, brother.
Thank you.
You and I have been friends for a long time. This is probably the most beautiful setting we could ever have to talk about this. Every time I see you, I always ask how you been. Vice versa. But the George Floyd Square has a very piece of my heart because I'm very proud of it. When I got the phone call from Jacob Frey State's came from me and my friends were in the room and they came swept with the case. So my job as a guardian is to be able to say, hey, Mayor, what you said is exactly correct, but at some point the healing has to have a no time in the policy. When people are healing and they're thinking about the trauma that happened on that land, maybe anything in that area would represent a lynching site. A lynching site is something that when somebody was killed back in the 1700s, and people walk by it and look at it and glorify it. But I will tell you something. I was able to talk to over 2 million, 3 million, 4 million people from all over the world. And whatever plans come of it, I lay tithe on that land, brother. So I trust the fact that the decisions that's going to be made on that land will be proper, respectable, and honorable. But the only request of the people, and I'm speaking for the people, is that they just need time. There needs to be a time that they're allowed to heal. I know we need to move forward. You're absolutely right. When it comes down to natural time, for 5 years is coming up. But I live PTSD every single day with that, brother. Because I have to listen. I've been on a national graphic. I can't walk around here and not understand my responsibility. Right. And I think this is a moment between you and I that we can keep waiting for a long time, brother. Just like I shook the Chiefs' hand, and those things like this. Just like this. And this is, but this is what they want to see. Progress. And even if it's a basic conversation between me and you right now, I'm gonna go back to the community development. I talked with the chief, like, yeah, I talked to Mr. Mayor and uptown across the street, and this artisan, and he said the truth, and I appreciate that truth, and I appreciate that so much. And hey, you have my